PH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I am talking about Bloomburrow, of course, the newest set for the game of Magic, but I'm talking about it with regards to the Commander format. I did not do any spoilers for this set for a variety of reasons, which I won't get into. It is the first set that I have not done any spoilers for since the beginning of my channel. Had a couple people that didn't exactly love that, so I might go back to doing spoilers. We'll see. There is an absolute ton to talk about in this set, some positive and some negative. And I'm not staying away from the negative stuff. Sorry, I'm going to speak my opinion. It is my channel. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about from this set. I know a lot of people are really loving this set. There are some things I really don't like, and I'm going to voice my opinion on those things. So we're going to start out in this video with some of the stuff I don't love. I know it can be nitpicky. Again, I'm going to hear the old man yelling at cloud comment, I'm sure, but there's also a lot in this set that I do like. And of course, there's a ton that we are going to see in the Commander format without a doubt. Okay, so starting out with the stuff that kind of bugs me a little, let's call it that, right? The stuff I don't love about this set. We got a whole bunch of creature types from this set. This is a very heavy tribal theme, which again, that part about it I don't love either. There's so much tribal support for this set, which is good if you're in those tribes. And if you're not, it's completely useless to you. Little overboard with the tribal in this set. However, the part that really bugs me is the creature types, and I will, again, a little nitpicky, but for those who don't know, cephalids are no longer a creature type in the game of Magic. And for someone who has a Abishon deck, that actually directly affects me, and I don't love it a whole lot. Cephalids are now just octopuses. That creature type has completely vanished from the game of Magic. Viashino, same thing. There are no longer Viashinos, and I mean, those are kind of, especially Viashinos, kind of iconic, in my opinion. And now they're just lizards. And it's like, okay, all right, maybe they're just trying to simplify things, but now we got weasels, and we got raccoons, and we got possums, and we got skunks even. And I don't even know how many skunks there are from this set, but it kind of bugs me that we're getting rid of cephalids and Viashinos and some of these, creature types that have been around for a long, long time in the game of Magic. But it's okay because now we have skunks and possums and stuff. That kind of bugs me, just saying. The new abilities, not super in love with. I really don't love this, whatever this is called. And again, that's one of the things I don't love about it. I'm calling it the bunny paw mechanic, which I don't really like. So Seasons of Weaving, 4 blue sorcery, choose up to 5 bunny paws or bear paws. I don't know what to call them. Worth of modes. Like, I just really don't like the wording here on a lot of these cards. It really bugs me. Again, I know it's being nitpicky, but I'm airing my grievances here. And again, what are we calling this? I don't know. I'm sure someone has a name for it that might stick eventually, but the bunny paws just feels very goofy and almost like an unset. For me, as the spoilers were coming out, I wasn't getting very excited about this set because a lot of the cards I was seeing were like, man, that looks like an uncard to me. Very much a lot of the cards from this set feel like they could be in an unset. And of course, because unsets are black bordered now, I guess we would never know the difference if these cards originally were intended for an unset and they just ended up putting them in this one because it fit the theme of what they were doing. There's a lot of cards from this set that feel that way for me. And this bunny paw mechanic kind of feels that way as well. It's just a bit goofy for me. I don't love it. The gift mechanic, I actually like this mechanic, what it's doing. Okay. It does actually work really good in the Commander format because it's doing the political thing. I just don't like the way they did it. They just did it in a really goofy, childish sort of, and maybe that's the theme of the set. It's just this childish sort of goofy, comical theme with the cutesy rabbits and all that. I think they went a little too far. That's the one big beef I have with this set is they just went a little too far. I don't hate the aesthetic of this set. I just thought they went too far with it, right? So Longstock Brawl, 1 green mana sorcery. Gift a tapped fish. And I'll just say, I believe it was this exact card. It got spoiled a while, like it got leaked. And it was on my Discord, and everybody was like, this isn't real, is it? Like when you first see this, gift a tapped fish, you're like, that's not a real Magic card. That was the initial reaction on my Discord was, oh, this can't be real. This is a fake card that someone made. I do like what it's doing, though. What it's actually doing does fit in the Commander format. I just don't like the way they worded it. You may promise an opponent a gift as you cast this spell. Like, why do they have to word it that way? So promise is now a thing that has to be included in the game of Magic. Like when I first read that, again, it feels like Ashnod's coupon or something. It feels very much like an unmechanic. I mean, we all get what it's doing. I just don't know why they word it that way. You may promise? What? That's silly. So you're going to promise an opponent a gift as you cast this spell. If you do, they create a tapped 1/1 blue fish creature token before its other effects. I like the interaction with opponents, okay? For me, I like the way they did this, like with the Strixhaven cycles, the mastery cards like Baleful Mastery, I like the way they did it there, where I can pay less and then why can't they just do that here? Why do they have to have that silly wording? Why can't they just say your opponent gets to create a fish? Why do they have to say you promise a gift? Goofy. I don't love it. I like the mechanic. I just don't like the way they worded it. It's very weird wording. Also, a little nitpicky again, but man, there is a lot of cards from this set where you really need to take a deep breath before you read them. And I'm actually, not even joking, avoiding, for example, the card that is on the screen right now. I'm not even going to talk about it because I literally would have to take a few breaths in order to read that entire card. Are you kidding me with that? You know, I remember back in the day, people always used to make fun of Ice Cauldron, which is actually a pretty good card in a Commander game. And people would make fun of it because it was so wordy. But now we're just getting like, there just got to be like 3 or 4 cards, at least from this set, that have as much words on them as an Ice Cauldron. They're so wordy. A lot of really wordy cards. I know it's being nitpicky, but man, they're just getting really out of hand with the amount of text on cards now. All right, enough with the bad stuff. Let's talk about the good stuff. And I will first say what I really like about this set, maybe my favorite thing from this set, are the reprints. Pretty good reprints as far as the cards that they chose. However, what I said about the Lord of the Rings set and also about the Warhammer set is when I see Commander staple reprints in Commander sets, and of course, most of these are from the Commander precons, I want to see new art. I love it. I love seeing new art on old Commander staples like this rapid hybridization. Great. And this is what you need to do more with Wizards of the Coast. I might actually run out and buy a copy of this rapid hybridization just because it's got different art and I like the art on it. And of course, I have like 12 copies of rapid hybridization already, but I might actually run out and buy this just because I like the new art. Temp with Discovery too. Like this art on this card. And I have this in a couple of decks and might actually run out and buy this one just because it has new art on it. So good job with putting different art on these Commander staple reprints. And just in general, I think the art from the set's pretty great. So I will give a shout out to the great art from this set. And I will also give a shout out to bringing back Threshold. Thank you. I think I've said in a couple videos that I think Threshold, I have always liked that as an ability, and it got brought back in this set. Weird that they brought it back in this set, whatever. It's not really a graveyard theme in this set, I don't think, but maybe a little bit of it. But Threshold's a great mechanic. There's so many great mechanics from back in the day that just never get revisited, and I'm not sure why. Finally bringing them back, Threshold. Good job there. All right, getting to the actual cards that we're going to see a ton in the Commander format, and these are going to be absolute slam dunks for Commander staples, I think. I'm sure people are talking about them a ton already. I'm going to start out with the real obvious ones, and 3-Tree City, to me, is going to be the next Cavern of Souls. It's going to be one of those absolute auto-includes in any tribal deck, and of course, because Cavern of Souls is played quite a bit in other formats as well, for that reason, we might see this card cost a lot. In the Commander format, it's just an absolute slam dunk. I mean, it would be like putting Cabal Coffers in your mono black deck or something, right? It's just one of those cards that everyone's going to want to auto-include in their tribal decks. So it's a legendary land. Thank you for making it a legendary land. They got away from making legendary lands for a while for some reason. I'm not sure why. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Add a colorless, so it's not entering the battlefield tapped. Pay 2 and tap, choose a color, add an amount of mana of that color equal to the number of creatures you control of the chosen type. So this is essentially a Nykthos, which of course, again, is Commander staple, expensive card. A lot of people auto-include it in their monocolored decks, and maybe even in 2-color decks, I've seen it. 3-Tree City is the Nykthos for tribal decks. How many tribal decks are there in the Commander format? Like a gazillion, right? If you included, all tribal decks, I would say it's easily the most popular archetype in the Commander format. So yeah, this card's going to go in all those decks. And of course, it might be the most popular card from this set. And I think it's likely going to be pretty expensive. Next up, Dawn's Truce. And I have 3 white cards in a row here. And as I've been saying for a while, white doesn't need the help anymore, Wizards of the Coast, but they keep printing all these busted cards for white. And in fact, again, you could easily make the argument that some of the best cards from the set are white. So Dawnstruce, 1 and a white, instant, gift a card. So now you're going to be promising your opponent a card. You're going to let them draw a card. I don't know, why did they just say that, right? So you and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. Pretty fantastic, of course. A lot of ways you can use that. If the gift was promised, so if you let your opponent draw a card, permanents you control also gain indestructible into the turn. So 2 mana, essentially heroic intervention, right? This is a white heroic intervention, but you also have to let your opponent draw a card. But again, that I don't love the wording, but that's why that mechanic works so good in the Commander format, because of course you give it to the guy that you want to make friends with or the guy that's not doing so well. There's a lot of ways you can manipulate that outcome to your advantage, right? Obviously, this card's going to go in a ton of decks. Starfall Invocation. And of course, we're going to get a whiteboard wipe with every set, as to be expected. So there's a lot of competition here, but this one is pretty fantastic. 3 white, white, sorcery. Gift a card. So again, we're going to give our opponent a card. Let them draw a card. Destroy all creatures. So a 5 mana destroy all creatures, not super great, but if the gift was promised, so if we let our opponent draw a card, return a creature card, put into your graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. Pretty great, right? So I think this is going to, this could easily replace like a Divine Reckoning or something like one of those board wipes that people like to put in their decks to save their commander and get everything else. But, I'm playing a Voltron deck or I'm playing, something where I want my commander to, most decks want their commander in play. Here I can just let my opponent draw a card, destroy all creatures, and then return my commander to play. That seems pretty good, right? So this is definitely, again, even though there is so much competition for white board wipes, this is certainly one that's going to see a lot of play in the Commander format because of what it specifically does, right? Probably the one getting the most buzz, though, is Perch Protection. For white, white instant, gift an extra turn. Oh, so now you got to give your opponent an extra turn. But it's actually kind of almost an upside. So create 4 2/2 blue bird creature tokens with flying. So if I don't do the gift, this is 6 mana instant speed, create 4 bird tokens, 2/2s of flying. That's not bad. 6 mana instant speed, not bad. Not bad at all. However, if you let your opponent take an extra turn, all permanents you control phase out until your next turn. Your life total can't change, and you gain protection from everything. Exile Perch Protection. So it's a Teferi's Protection. So this is, if you give your opponent an extra turn, a Teferi's Protection, but also you get the bird tokens. Now, I know people will say 6 mana Teferi's Protection, that's terrible. However, the extra turn is almost an upside here, right? Because think about what's going to happen here. You're phased out during your opponent's extra turn, right? Your opponent casts whatever, a crater hoof attack or something, and you cast Perch Protection. You put the birds into play, you phase out all your stuff, and you give that person an extra turn, or you can give the other person, again, who are you giving extra turn to, right? There's a lot of politics involved here. During that person's extra turn, you're phased out. So they're getting to do a bunch of stuff. Your stuff's not getting hit. If they cast a board wipe, you're fine. If they cast a crater hoof attack, you're fine. If they cast a cyclonic rift, you're fine. Anything they're doing, you're just sitting there not getting affected by it. There are a couple things that can affect you, like commander damage that can't be prevented. But other than that, there's almost no way for your opponents to hurt you. So gifting the extra turn can kind of be an upside for you. And again, in fact, you can play the politics angle where one guy's being very problematic. You gift the extra turn to some other guy who's then going to, you say, hey, why don't you get rid of all of his stuff or kill him or whatever. This is just a really great politics card in the commander format. And then also protecting your stuff. Pretty neat, I think. Yes, Teferi's Protection, just as straight up, I'm protecting my stuff is probably better, but there's a lot more options with a card like this, I think. Let's talk about Prosperous Bandit, because of course, every set now has to have some treasure token generator, and this is probably the best one from this set. And this is, again, I think likely this is going to be a chase card from this set. Likely. 2 and a red, Raccoon, Rogue, 2/2, Offspring 1. So of course, if we pay an extra 1, we'll get a 1/1 copy of this, which can be very relevant. Has first strike, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, create that many treasure tokens. Oh boy. So this thing has the possibility, or I guess the offspring it's making as well, to create a whole ton of treasure tokens. If you just connect with this guy, I guess you're going to create 2 treasure tokens, and then the offspring will give you another one if you can connect with it. So going to be great in any deck where you can make your creatures hard to block or unblockable. Also is great in any deck where you can bump your creature's power. I guess if you were in a, like a +1/+1 counter theme, maybe in green and red, right? Because then this guy gets bigger and he creates even more, because that many means if he's a 5/5, you're going to create 5 treasure tokens when he connects. Just, one of those cards, because it's creating treasure tokens, it's definitely going to see play in the Commander format. Polywog Prodigy is, I think, a card that's likely getting a lot of buzz, although this is one of those cards where the comparisons to, I don't know, like a Rhystic Study or something might make it so that everyone runs out and buys this card. But at the same time, people might say, okay, well, it's actually way worse, so why would you bother, right? It's in that weird sort of area where it has the potential to be amazing, but also it has the potential to be not very good. So a lot of people might be poo-pooing on this, and because of that, might make it so that nobody really goes after this. I'm actually curious to see where it's going to end up. So 1 and a blue Frog Wizard 1/3 has Evolve. So of course, whenever a creature you control enters, if that creature has greater power or toughness, then this creature put a +1/+1 counter on it. And of course, in this case, because it's got a 1 power, it's very easy to put a counter on this guy. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell with mana value less than Polywog Prodigy's power, draw a card. Oh boy. So of course, right out of the gate, it's just a 1/3. So your opponents have to cast 0 mana stuff in order for you to draw cards. And a lot of people be like, it's terrible. It's never going to happen, right? I mean, Mox Amber or something, Mox Diamond. This actually, funny enough, might end up becoming a CEDH card for that reason. Maybe. I'm not a CEDH expert, but of course, lots of 0 mana things being cast in CEDH games. This might be a pretty good card draw option for those guys. I think it's pretty good in any Commander game. Obviously, in a game where you can bump its power, and likely because it's already got the Evolve mechanic, any +1/+1 counter theme, I think this card is a slam dunk in a +1/+1 counter theme if you got blue. So likely a Simic commander that's doing that. Put like 4 or 5 counters on this guy every time your opponents cast a spell, I guess a non-creature spell with mana value like 4 or 5 or less. You're drawing a card off of it. That's a pretty good card draw. So, there will be comparisons to Esper Sentinel. There will be comparisons to Rhystic Study, that kind of stuff. It's a funny one because it's a card that people will look at and a lot of people might freak out in how good it is. And then other people might be like, oh, that's not very good at all because there's these other better options, right? So I'm kind of curious where this one will end up. It's certainly going to see play in the format. All right, Patchwork Banner is definitely going to be a card that sees a ton of play in the Commander format. This is one of those strict upgrade cards, I think. So 3 mana artifact. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. So you got an Anthem for whatever creature type you're playing, and then it taps to add 1 mana of any color. And it doesn't seem very splashy, but a lot of people still play Heraldic Banner, I believe it's called. And what a lot of people will do with that one you're choosing a color. And a lot of people play that in their tribal themes, like a fairy tribal deck, for example, because pretty much all your fairies are going to be small. They're going to be like 1/1s, and they're also going to likely be blue. So if I name blue, then they're all going to get +1/+0, and it's also a mana rock. Patchwork Banner is probably better, and in fact, if you are playing Heraldic Banner, you're likely just going to swap it out for this. There's a possibility, I guess, that you are playing like Flying Tribal, where your creatures are not all the same creature type, but are the same color. That's rare, though. It's rare that that's going to happen. Usually, if you're playing Heraldic Banner, you're probably already playing a tribe of some kind, which means Patchwork Banner is probably just better. Insatiable Frugivore. This guy really likes his strawberries, apparently. 3 and a black Rat Berserker 2/4. When Insatiable Frugivore enters, create a food token. Then you may exile 3 cards from your graveyard. If you do, repeat the process. And as I've been saying for a long time, in fact, for about a year now, I did a little rant in my, I guess it would have been Wilds of Eldraine video where they did a heavy food theme. I mean, they just love the food theme. Whoever it is, Mark Rosewater, somebody just will not let the food mechanic go away. It is insane. It's almost more popular than Treasures at this point. Like, it's absolutely insane how much they push the food mechanic. And as I said back then, and I'm saying again, food aren't very good. Pay 2 mana, tap it, and sack it to gain 3 life is something that most people are never going to do in a Commander game. And of course, this is a Commander card. It was printed in the precons. But of course, what they keep doing over and over and over and over again is finding other ways to use that food, right? Because nobody wants to just do that. So we have to find other ways to use food, which I don't love. And of course, this is a win con. Again, another food win con if you're doing that. You can repeat the process, which of course means you can keep repeating the process. It's not you repeat it once, you can just keep doing that. So if you have 30 cards in your graveyard, you can exile all of them and create 10 food, right? I'm pretty sure that's how this will work. So obviously this is a great way to create food, but also 3 and a black, sacrifice X foods, creatures you control get plus X plus O and gain menace until end of turn. So now if I create those 10 foods, I mean, this almost becomes like a Crater Hoof sort of scenario for a black deck. I mean, a food deck, but this doesn't have to be a food deck, right? This can just be a graveyard deck. I just have a really full graveyard. I'm not playing food at all. I just have this guy come down, exile my entire graveyard, make 10 foods, and then I sacrifice them all, and my entire team gets plus 10 plus O and menace. So again, maybe not as good as a Crater Hoof, but pretty close. I mean, this could be very easily a win con in a whole lot of decks that have nothing to do with food at all, but also is a fantastic food generator if you're in a food deck. Bloodroot Apothecary. Oh boy, this is a spicy one. 2 and a green, Squirrel Druid 3/3, Toxic 2. So we brought back the Toxic ability. When Bloodroot Apothecary enters, you and target opponent each create a treasure token. Oh, isn't that nice? Little huggy card, giving your opponent a treasure token. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-creature token, that player gets 2 poison counters. Holy! So obviously that's why you're giving your opponent a treasure token, but you can ignore everything else on this card, and the fact this guy's got Toxic too, as far as I'm concerned, is just flavor. Obviously there are a lot of ways to just completely shut down treasures, like a March on the Machines, which, those treasures as they get created will just go away. They'll never get a chance to use them, if that's what you want to do. But if you really want to punish your opponents, and I just made a video a few months back talking about hating on treasures and punishing your opponents. Again, there's 2 ways you can do it. I can hate on treasures where I can just easily destroy them all with like a meltdown, or March of the Machines, they just don't exist at all. Or I can use a guy like this to punish my opponents for using treasure tokens. Again, food tokens, blood tokens, like just go down the list of a ridiculous amount of artifact tokens, because of course this is a non-creature token, which is almost entirely going to be those artifact tokens. All of those that we have in the format now. Like what is there outside of that? I think it's pretty much entirely going to be those artifact tokens. And every time they crack one, they're going to get 2 poison counters. That means if somebody sacks 5 treasure tokens, they're dead, right? Because they have 10 poison counters. Wow. I mean, obviously this can also very easily fit into a infect theme. Of course, everyone's going to be sacking treasure tokens and clue tokens and food tokens in every single Commander game anyway. So it's going to be good no matter what. You could put this in any deck. It doesn't have to just go in an infect deck. You could put this in any deck, and it's just going to be I guess people won't actually kill themselves, but it's just going to prevent people from sacking their tokens, right? Moonstone Eulogist. 3 black, Bat Warlock 4/4. And again, this is another one that might seem like it fits a specific theme, but I think it probably go in any deck. 4/4 flyer. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you create a blood token. So, fits the blood token theme, I guess. But of course, creatures your opponents control dying happens in every Commander game, right? Again, maybe more so in a deck where you're killing your opponent's creatures a lot, but you're going to be doing that anyway. Your opponents are going to be sacrificing their creatures. People are going to be casting board wipes, all of that. So just giving you blood tokens, which of course are looting, which looting is always good as well. Also creating tokens, which, it can fit a lot of themes. It can fit the discard theme. It can fit a bunch of themes, because blood tokens also fit a bunch of themes, and creatures dying fits a bunch of themes as well. But also, whenever you sacrifice an artifact, which of course works with the blood tokens, put a +1/+1 counter on Moonstone Eulogist and you gain 1 life. So again, that fits a ton of themes. This guy fits in so many themes, and I imagine people are also going to put him in the Bat tribal decks, which we now have those as well from this set. But again, fits my opponent's creatures are dying, maybe Aristocrats theme, because of course I have those Grave Pact effects. If I want to be creating blood tokens, if I want to be discarding or looting, if I want to be sacrificing artifacts in a different kind of artifact. So now I'm in the treasure token theme. I have a treasure token commander in black, and I'm going to be sacrificing treasure tokens all the time, right? Ignore the blood token part now. Every time I sacrifice a treasure token, I put a counter on this guy and I gain a life. That seems amazing, right? So this goes in a ton of decks. This guy goes in a ton of Commander decks, I think. Let's talk about 20-toed Toad. Again, a lot of these cards are just, they seem really goofy, and a lot of play on words in this set too, which some people like, more so than others. 3 and a blue, Frog Wizard 3/3. Your maximum hand size is 20. Hey, that's pretty good. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, put a +1 counter on 20 Toad, and draw a card. So decent card draw option. Just attack with 2 or more creatures. A lot of decks are definitely doing that. Military Intelligence is already a card that does that if you're in that theme. However, why this card is going to get shoehorned into a lot of decks, I think, whenever 20 Toad attacks, you win the game if there are 20 or more counters on it, or you have 20 or more cards in hand. So just a great win con for a lot of decks out there, I think. Again, if you're in a +1/+1 counter theme, that's one place that people might not consider this. This is a pretty good alternate win con for you. All those Simic Ascendancy people out there, I have never seen that card win a game. Not ever. No one ever lets it get there. You might have a better chance with 20 Toad. Pile counters on this guy, and then he just attacks. So for me, that's a little bit easier to do, because whenever this guy attacks, you get the win the game trigger. So, no one ever lets your Simic Ascendancy get to, I think that's also 20 counters. Here, you can have like 3 counters on this guy, and then on your turn, if I'm in that Simic counters deck, I can just cast some spell that dumps a bunch of counters on him and then attack with him. And, it gives your opponents less of a chance to react. Then I just attack with them and I win the game, right? So it's a pretty good win con on a +1/+1 counter theme. And also, of course, any deck where you just want to have lots of cards in hand, I likely would have one myself that I could possibly use this. I have a lot of those effects where I just draw a whole ton of cards all at once. I'm just saying any deck like that where I just draw a lot of cards and I don't really have a way to close out games. Here's a win con for you. All right, Valley Rot Collar. And I'm not going to talk about a lot of the tribal stuff because there's just so much to talk about. This is the one card, though, that is going to be huge for a lot of these tribes and definitely needs to be talked about. 1 on a black Squirrel Warlock, 1/3 with Menace. Whenever a Valley Rot Collar attacks, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of other squirrels, bats, lizards, and rats you control. And ignore the fact this guy's a squirrel, although of course he's going to go on those squirrel decks. For me, the big one here is rat. This is such a fantastic win con for any rat tribal deck. If you have a Marrow-Gnar deck, and that's a really popular commander in the format, there's a commander that can very easily, it's sort of like the rat Krenko, right? You can very easily create a whole ton of rats. If I got like 12 rats in play, all this guy has to do is attack. Maybe he'll get blocked and he'll die. Oh well, each opponent loses 12 life and I gain 12 life. Like, you can very easily close out the game. This is a fantastic win con for any of those decks in any of these themes, right? Again, squirrel might seem like the obvious one, I guess, because this guy's a squirrel. But for me, rat's the big one here. There's a lot of rat tribal decks out there, and they tend to have a lot of rats in play. And you can just drain your opponents for a ton of life with this. Really good card for those themes. Okay, Octomancer, I imagine, is probably getting a lot of buzz. It's certainly good in a commander game. 3 blue and a green. Frog Druid 3/3 has Gift and Octopus. You may promise an opponent a gift as you cast this spell. If you do, when it enters, they create an 8/8 blue octopus creature token. That's a pretty good gift. However, at the beginning of each end step, create a token that's a copy of target creature token that entered the battlefield this turn. So what's going to happen here? You're going to gift your opponent an 8/8 octopus, and then of course on your end step, you're going to get one, because this is the beginning of each end step. Then going forward, every single time someone creates a token creature on their turn, you're going to get one as well. This is create a token that's a copy of target creature token that entered the battlefield this turn. So of course, you can only get one. If your opponent creates 7 squirrels, you'll get 1 squirrel. You're not going to get 7 because it is targeting. I guess if those tokens have Shroud or Hexproof, it's not going to do anything, but that's not exactly going to happen a lot. It's just free value, right? Just free value every single turn. Pretty fantastic, I think. And again, works on you. So if I'm in the theme where I'm creating tokens of stuff on my turn, right, at the beginning of each end step, now I'm going to create a token copy of my commander or something. Maybe I'm playing a Sakashima deck or something. Now I will get another token copy of my commander on my end step. So this is a card that I think you could probably put in any deck, and it's going to give you lots of great value. Very similar to a Fairy Artisans. Again, Fairy Artisans is one of those cards that everyone just shoehorned into all their commander decks back in the day when, there wasn't so many auto-includes in the commander format. And, you had a limited amount of options. So, let's put Fairy Artisans in every single deck I make because it is just a great value-y card. Funny enough, works fantastically with Octomancer as well, because of course, at the beginning of each end step, it doesn't matter who's creating the token, it can be you as well. Octomancer is going to work a lot that way. We're just going to give you free value. If your opponents are creating token creatures, you're just going to get token creatures as well. And of course, even more so if you're doing it, right? Trail Tracker Scout, 1 and a green, Raccoon Scout 1/3, taps to add 1 mana of any color. So it's a 2 mana dork that adds 1 mana of any color, which is, I would say, the standard. However, whenever you expend 8, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. And this is another ability from the set that, I like it. It's pretty good. I don't know if I love it because it can get a little confusing, right? Because what it means is you expend 8 as you spend your 8th total mana to cast spells during your turn. So it can get a little tricky. I think, again, I might be being nitpicky here, but keeping track of, I guess it would be like Storm, right? You kind of got to keep track. So obviously if I cast an 8 mana value spell, it's going to trigger this, but also if I cast a 2 and then a 2 and then a 4, that's total mana value 8. It's looking for the total mana value you've spent in that turn, right? And of course, return a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand is pretty great. And early in the game, this guy's just a mana dork. Later in the game, now I can start returning stuff to my hand. I think it's pretty good. Calamity of Cinders. This is a fantastic board wipe, I think. And in fact, it's right up there as far as mono red board wipes go in the format. 5 red sorcery, but has Convoke. So of course, we're never going to pay 7 mana for this. And in fact, we don't want to pay 7 mana for this because Calamity of Cinders deals 6 damage to each untapped creature. So not only is this going to be possibly just, I guess it could be free, right? If you had 7 creatures in play and 2 of them are red, this is a free board wipe that also doesn't hit any of your creatures because you just tap them all down. Wow. This card's amazing, actually, the more I think about it. When I first saw it, I'm like, wow, this could be a one-sided board wipe, but it also could be a one-sided free board wipe. It's very easy for this to be super, super cheap, and it is also possibly one-sided. Amazing. This is an amazing board wipe in the format. Moving right along, Fountain Port is definitely another one that's going to see a ton of play in the format. Might also be expensive. It's a colorless land, right? We always have more attention on lands because it's so easy to slot them into your commander decks, of course, especially ones like this that don't enter the battlefield tapped. There's really not a lot of downside, but also because it's colorless. There is no color identity here, so it can go in any deck. And this is certainly one that I think a lot of people are going to run out and grab. Taps out of colorless. Okay, fine. So you do have to be a little wary of how many colorless lands you put in your deck, especially if you're playing like 2 or 3 or more colors. In a monocolored deck, you definitely don't have to worry about that so much. Has a whole bunch of abilities here that, again, are just great in every commander game, right? So 2 mana, tap, sacrifice a token, draw a card. I guess you would more so play this in a deck where you're creating tokens. I guess I might have to grab this for my Benny Brax deck. It seems really good there. It also can make tokens, so I really might have to put this on my Benny Brax deck, right? 3 and tap, pay 1 life, create a 1/1 blue fish creature token. Or I can pay 4 and tap to create a treasure token. So obviously you can create those tokens and then later sacrifice in the draw card. This is almost a trading post on a land, right? And of course, trading post is fantastic in the commander format. Yeah, this is kind of like a trading post land. And because it's drawing cards and creating treasure tokens, people are probably going to be losing their mind over this. Just one of those cards that can just so very easily slot into so many decks. I imagine it's going to be kind of pricey. The more I think about it, the more I'm thinking this is a slam dunk in my Benny Brax deck, so I might have to grab a copy. Certainly going to see a ton of play in the format. All right, Osteomancer Adept, 1 and a black, Squirrel Warlock 2/2 with Death Touch. Tap until end of turn. You may cast creature spells from your graveyard by foraging, in addition to paying their other costs. If you cast a spell this way, that creature enters with a finality counter on it. So you still have to pay those other costs, but you're casting creature spells from your graveyard. That's pretty good. And I wanted to cover this card. I think it's a pretty good card, but also it's using the foraging ability, which is the other. I think I covered all the abilities in this video. Pretty sure I got all of them here. So to forage, exile 3 cards from your graveyard or sacrifice a food. If a creature with a finality counter on it would die, exile it instead. So, of course, if you're playing a food deck, pretty good slot in. Again, I don't know how many black decks out there are doing food, but if you're doing that, actually, I can think of a few. Azmoran. Used to have an Azmoran deck that's definitely doing food. And when I made my Azmoran deck, there wasn't a lot of food support. In fact, I don't think I had any cards in there that did the food thing. And now there's actually, seems like a pretty great one, especially since you're discarding. It actually seems like a fantastic one. Also, there's a few commanders out there that are black that are doing the food theme. Seems fantastic there, but also again, that like the self-mill theme, because you don't have to sacrifice a food. You can just exile 3 cards from your graveyard. I'm doing a Sidisi deck. I'm self-milling a lot. Hey, look at, I milled the creature that I really want in play. I'll just exile 3 lands from my graveyard because I won't be able to get those back anyway, and just cast that creature from my graveyard. Obviously this card's going to see a lot of play in a lot of decks, without a doubt. All right, Sunspine Lynx, which I've already seen has gotten quite a bit of buzz. 2 red elemental cat 5/4. Players can't gain life. That's pretty great in a lot of themes. Damage can't be prevented. Pretty great in a lot of themes. And obviously, certain themes where you want to be throwing damage around a lot can be particularly good. And in particular, if your way to win is by throwing damage directly at your opponent's faces and they're just gaining a ton of life, you're just never going to win, right? So having that players can't gain life is pretty darn good. And I mean, there already are cards that do that, but this is a fantastic one because when it enters the battlefield, it deals damage to each player equal to the number of non-basic lands that player controls. So it is also a price of progress. This card is doing a lot, and again, because of what it's doing, it's going to fit in a lot of themes. It fits in the non-combat damage theme. It fits in the, again, I'm just throwing damage around. I don't want damage to be prevented. I don't want my opponents gaining life. I'm punishing them for playing non-basic lands, which I really like a lot. I'm a big fan of Price of Progress myself. I play a lot of monocolored decks. In fact, all my decks are either monocolored or 2-colored. So, of course, they're going to play a lot of basic lands, so this card isn't going to hurt me nearly as much as it would hurt most people. I've heard certain people saying lately that there's almost no reason to put basic lands in your deck at all. So let's put this card in our deck, everybody, and punish those people for playing all those non-basic lands. I love cards like this. Let's have more of this in the Commander format. All right, and ending off with a card that likely is maybe getting overshadowed a little bit. So let's call this my sleeper pick from the set. And again, it has that gift ability, which I actually like the ability, just don't love the way they worded it. Wear down, 1 and a green, sorcery. And I know people will say that they don't love that this is sorcery speed removal, but in my experience, I find that people play their removal like 90% on their turn anyway. I can't count how many times I've seen someone play a Swords to Plowshares on their turn. Happens all. In fact, I absolutely have seen people play a Swords to Plowshares on their turn more than not on their turn. So sorcery speed, yeah, it would be preferred if it was instant speed, but I think it would be way too good if it was. So gift a card. Again, we're going to let our opponent draw a card. Pick whoever you want. Let that opponent draw a card. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Of course, that's great. If the gift was promised, instead destroy 2 artifacts or enchantments. And man, this card can be an absolute blowout. I think 2 mana. I know it's sorcery speed, okay? But 2 mana. This guy over here, I'm going to make friends with him and let him draw a card. And then this guy over here who has a Rhystic Study and a Smothering Tithe, I'm going to blow them both up for 2 mana. Seems pretty good. I'm not saying this is a Force of Vigor or something, or it's like the best option for this in the format now, but it is a really neat option and a really good one as well. Again, the gifting part I can use to my advantage. And I just always find for me, again, maybe it's because playing against my patrons, they make particular decks. I always find for me, there's just so many artifacts and enchantments on the table that I want to get rid of. And just having a 2 mana card that can get rid of 2 of them is pretty darn good. I like this card a lot. It's one of my favorites from this set. All right, there you go. Whew. That's a lot to talk about. There certainly is a lot to talk about from this set. And in fact, I was just going to do one video doing a review of this set, but of course I didn't talk about any of the commanders. I decided because there was so many cards to talk about and so many things in general just talk about from this set that I would make another video for the commanders. So I will be doing that. Stay tuned for that. If you're interested in watching me talk about the commanders from this set, there certainly is, I would say, more positive than negative from this set. Again, there's a few things that I don't particularly love that just sort of rub me the wrong way about this set. Again, for me, there is just a little bit that is just a little bit too goofy and feels like an unset from this that I don't particularly love. But other than that, we definitely got a lot of great cards. And for sure, we're going to see a bunch of these in the Commander format. You guys let me know in the comments below what you thought of this set overall and which cards you're going to be putting in all your Commander decks. That is it for today. And thanks for tuning in.